Okay, so we have Millie, who has now completed her coaching of her two sporting skills. She's evaluated her first session, which was the tennis serve with Kira, and she's now going to evaluate her second session, which was the forehand with Sarah.
So following on from my last skill, for the forehand I used the whole method, which linked well because the forehand is a complex skill with only one part. This was rather challenging for Sarah, but I managed to adapt the training session to fulfill the right method, complete the right method. I used both variable and fixed practice. I progressed into variable practice, so we started with the fixed, rather basic, and then as I gradually got on with the session, I linked it more to variable. I believe I wouldn't change this because I believe it worked quite well for Sarah's ability as an athlete. Furthermore, I used distributed practice. However, I could have used mass practice as the activities were rather stationary and Sarah didn't have to do a lot of movements. However, distributed allowed me to give feedback to Sarah as well during my her rest periods, and it also allowed us to collect in the tennis ball so we could then continue our exercises. And also, if I would have used massed, it would have meant she would be working for longer, so she could be more tired, so her shots could get worse as the lesson progressed. Furthermore, throughout the coaching session, I used person-orientated teaching style. This allowed me to have a strong interpersonal relationship with my athlete, and it allowed me to help Sarah build her confidence because she's a beginner, so she clearly didn't know much about the sport, so she could have needed that extra push to then be able to complete the activities to her full potential, helping to motivate her. Also using distributed practice allowed me to use person-orientated more because it reduces boredom. Moreover, in the methods of training, in the methods of teaching styles on the spectrum, I used style A of command. I used it throughout the whole of the training session because by using command it allowed me to know which stage Sarah was at with the forehand. So at the beginning I was demonstrating the ready position, so I would tell her where to move her feet and things like that. But as the lesson progressed, I used this less. I wouldn't change that style. And style B of practice, this allowed Sarah to get a feel for the skill, and it also allowed us to increase her confidence because the more she practices, the better she's going to get at the skill, which she clearly did, shown in her improvements she made across the course of the session. The last method I used was style D of self-check, feedback to self. So during the session I tried to ask Sarah how she felt about the skill, what she think went well, but sometimes this was quite challenging for her because she's a very beginner, so she's not experienced in sport in general. So I should have potentially used a different method where it's more me feeding back to her rather than her trying to come up with ideas, because I think she found that rather challenging. Next, the learning styles I used were visual and auditory. Visual allowed Sarah to get a look for what the skill was supposed to look like, and auditory allowed me to teach it to her. However, I could have used kinesthetic learning because I did use kinesthetic learning, because she learned things as she did it, so she got a feel for the skill continuously throughout the training session, we didn't have many long periods of breaks either, and I feel like when she got into the skill, she was continuously doing the skill well, and by like the feel of it, she was really able to progress. So kinesthetic was really helpful. And the types of guidance I used for Sarah were visual, verbal, and manual. I especially used manual guidance because Sarah is a very beginner, and this allowed me to make sure she's in the correct position to perform the skill. Without this, she is more likely to make errors because she could not know where her hand's supposed to go on the racket and the grip she's supposed to use, or during her follow through where it's supposed to go. By using visual and verbal guidance, this allowed Sarah to see how the skill is performed correctly, and along with manual guidance, this will make her more likely to perform it correctly. By using verbal guidance, this allowed me to give feedback to Sarah so she could understand what to do. And these are all the types of guidance I use.
Do you want to, okay, thanks, Millie. Do you want to maybe just go into perhaps any adaptations you made during the session to meet your? Did you have to adapt any of your teaching or learning methods actually within the session itself?
Yeah, I did. Could you possibly rephrase the question?
Yeah, sure. So you obviously created 2 very detailed plans on how you were going to teach and coach the tennis serve and the forehand. Whilst you were actually teaching that session, did you change anything within it that kind of went against your plan, and what were the reasons for that?
Okay. So with regards to both the training sessions, as I could tell from meeting both athletes that Kira had clearly been involved in quite a lot of sport previously. She was clearly used to being coached and the continuous type of coaching that's involved. So for example, when we did the activity ball toss against the fence, Kira got that within 3 tries. And this allowed me to progress the activities more quickly using more mass practice rather than distributed, because Kira obviously understood what to do more quickly because she's used to coaching terminology and things like that. She is more aware of how her body feels when performing the skill, which made my activities shorter than I anticipated them to be. However, I was able to adapt this by giving Kira more feedback as the session progressed and asking her more questions to get her to increase her knowledge of the sport more. And this is in comparison to Sarah, who was clearly a complete beginner, as we could tell from the first shot, which she just completely missed, that she'd never done this before and she was not used to coaching as such in sport. So with Sarah, I feel like I had to go a bit slower than I anticipated and really go back to the basics. So we started with the ready position and the grip because they are key elements in tennis, and without them, Sarah wouldn't have been able to complete the skill because she wouldn't have understood really what to do. And I had to use a lot of manual guidance as well for Sarah, which I didn't plan to use too much of it, but I ended up using a lot more than I anticipated because of her ability as an athlete, and as I said previously, it will allow her to get more of a feel for the skill because she's less used to coaching and she's opposite to Kira, so she's less aware of how her body should feel when performing the shot. And also with Sarah, I had to be slower in the stages of my coaching, so we spent more time doing the basics at the baseline. Even though she progressed quickly from the first activity, the second activity took her longer to grasp, and it was harder for her to understand what I was saying because she wasn't used to the type of terminology that I was moving, so I had to make it more simple to meet her demands as an athlete. And if I were to do this again, but the other way round, I would have to adapt the forehand drills for Kira, who is a more able athlete, to make them more quick and more understandable for her. And same with Sarah, I would completely slow the whole of the serve down because it's more of a challenging skill in tennis, but it's really key. So everything would be a lot slower and the type of guidance would be different. So with Sarah, with the serve, I would have to use a lot more manual guidance, but with Kira, with the forehand, I would reduce the manual guidance and increase the feedback. And with Kira, I was able to link it more to a game situation because Sarah was less able to understand what tennis is as a sport, whereas Kira would have had more general knowledge of what it was. That's it.